AI has moved from pilot projects to a national strategy. What are the specific outcomes that the government is prioritizing in the next 2 to 3 years, and how will progress will actually be measured?
I think in a country like India, what it can add to the economy is much more significant. The overlay of AI as a general purpose horizontal technology across a range of sectors is going to enhance productivity in those sectors. I think there are 2 or 3 very crucial outcomes of the summit on which we really need to deliver. First and foremost is this whole idea that we need greater democratization of AI resources.
When we look at India's growth trajectory, sustaining a 7% plus GDP growth, how does AI factor into that equation? And how do you think about the small, medium enterprises? How are public-private partnerships being structured to ensure that the national compute backbone is built at the pace that this mission demands?
If there is one thing that I would like to see emerge from this summit, it is for India.
Welcome to the Fine Print, FICCI's podcast, where we go beyond the headlines to examine the architecture behind India's most consequential economic and policy decisions. I'm Preeti Lobana. I chair the AI committee in FICCI, and I'm country manager at Google India. AI has moved from pilot projects to a national strategy. India is no longer asking about how and what to do in terms of AI adoption, but we are talking about how to lead responsibly and competitively. The AI Impact Summit held in February this year has been a landmark achievement for India. The convergence of 118 countries and over 20 heads of states in New Delhi culminated in a historic consensus in the New Delhi Declaration. At the heart of the summit was the Honorable Prime Minister's Manav vision, which provides a definitive framework for the future of AI, and one that is anchored in the essential principles of human dignity and ethical progress. Having had time to absorb the scale of the achievement over the past 2 weeks, I can confidently state that this summit had a big impact in terms of the global AI ecosystem and a moment of pride for India and every Indian who's close to this field. Today, we examine the execution architecture as we move forward. My guest needs little introduction. As Secretary of the Ministry of Electronics and Information Technology, Shri S. Krishnan has been at the helm of one of the most consequential policy journeys in the recent historic times in India. Secretary Krishnan, welcome to the Fine Print.
Thank you very much for having me.
At FICCI, we see our role as a constructive bridge between government, industry, startups, MSMEs, and global investors. Through sustained policy dialogue and international engagement, we aim to align regulatory intent with actual market readiness on the ground. The AI Impact Summit and the Delhi Declaration were what I call inflection points, where strategy moved beyond just theory and discussion to structured national commitment. FICCI remains committed to supporting this transition from vision to execution. Secretary Krishnan, the summit was genuinely a historic moment. 118 countries, a landmark Delhi Declaration, investment commitments that hit $200 billion. But the real question now is delivery. What are the specific outcomes that the government is prioritizing in the next 2 to 3 years, and how will progress will actually be measured?
I think there are 2 or 3 very crucial outcomes of the summit on which we really need to deliver. First and foremost is this whole idea that we need greater democratization of AI resources. And this summit was the first one which was held in the Global South. We gave voice to what the Global South needed and how it could actually go about receiving the kind of attention that it needed from the global community. And India, I think, has a key role in this entire ecosystem. Therefore, to translate what this summit envisaged into actual action is going to be a crucial step. So the MeitY platform and the various other global commons, AI commons declaration, all of these need to be given actual form to make sure that we deliver on these promises. We make sure that countries in the global south have access to compute, have access to models, have access to data in order to sort of move forward with the kind of applications that they need to really ramp up productivity and to implement the possible solutions that AI could bring about for their economic and other problems, social problems in their societies. I think that is going to be one crucial element. And the strategy of how this is going to happen and how India is going to support this, along with a range of other stakeholders, that's going to be an important outcome. The second big opportunity and the second big delivery point, and when I say India, I don't just mean the government of India. I mean, all of our stakeholders in the country, all of our companies, all of our startups, all of our academic institutions, the capacities that they have and what is it that they can deliver, I think is going to be critical. In the summit itself, we showcased more than 1,000 startups in various forms, separate startup pods which we had. Many of the large companies also hosted startups in their respective areas, and many of them had a platform to actually show to the world what they are capable of doing and the kind of innovative solutions and disruptive solutions they had built. And I understand there was a lot of interest across the world. We had close to about 8,000 delegates from all over the world, and many of them came and saw the various applications and solutions which are developed, and a lot of interest developed around what this could go out and do. So I think enabling this sort of a dialogue and enabling our startups and institutions and companies to actually deliver a range of solutions to the rest of the world, I think that's going to be another key outcome which we will have to see how that works. The last aspect would be this whole dialogue on making sure that AI works in a positive and in a growth enhancing way for all stakeholders, and we are able to keep at bay the concerns that we have around, say, possible loss of jobs, around the possible other harms that AI could deliver. So some sort of a consensus on how AI itself would operate and how everyone comes together. And in that sense, the voluntary commitments that were given by many of the companies was, I think, very key and material, that they came forward voluntarily to commit to how AI itself should get used. And that would be an important way forward, without necessarily imposing nation-specific regulations, without being very constraining in the way we approach it, to make sure that we guide it and nudge it on a path which means the best outcomes for people of the world. So I think these three, and the last one, of course, is skilling, because, talent is going to be absolutely vital in this, and how the talent comes about and how we are able to nurture talent across the world is going to be critical. It's that, I think, is the key to this race. India features high in the vibrancy index globally simply because of the talent that we have in the AI space. And there's talent which we can share with the world, and there's also a lot we can do to help build this kind of capacity globally. In fact, we volunteered. We were the first to volunteer an Indian institution for the United Nations Global Network of Centers of Excellence. And I think that was a key step, and that is being followed up now with more institutions coming on board. And that will be an important way in which we nurture talent as well.
I couldn't agree with you more in terms of the vibrancy of our talent and the way startups and the young Indian demographic showed up in large numbers with not fear, but that positive approach towards the power of AI to transform the world. It was truly something great to see. Pivoting a little bit to specifics, Secretary Krishnan, when we think about areas like agriculture and health, these are use cases critical for India, critical for Global South. Do you have a vision in your mind where do you see this in 5 years' time? Like, what would have AI driven in this field?
I'll be very honest with you. I think, I've followed agriculture very closely. I have a family which is still engaged directly in agriculture. So I understand some of the concerns that they have. The one thing which has sort of really failed farmers in many parts of the country has been the fact that they do not get easy access to expert advice. Say about 30, 40 years ago, we used to have something called the Training and Visit Program, an extensive outreach where agriculture extension officers used to go and meet farmers and advise them on what they should do, what the cropping pattern should be, agronomy should be, and so on. An absence of that is something that many farmers actually feel, and very often in my experience in the state, they've come and spoken to us about it. I think AI truly has the opportunity to change that completely. The ability for a farmer to speak into a phone in his own language and ask, or her own language, and ask about any information relating to the market, relating to how he deals with his crops, relating to any of these issues, and to find an instant response and an expert response to a set of issues, I think that's a huge game-changing opportunity. The Vistar, the Bharat Vistar program, which the Ministry of Agriculture has launched, has the potential of being a true game changer. We've been very happy to support them in every way possible. So it has the entire agri stack. So every aspect of it, right from land records and where the land-related issues stand, to soil testing, to what kind of soil health is there, what could be the weather patterns, all of these. And the advantage, as was pointed out in the case of the Amul cow project, how quickly we were able to bring an agriculture-oriented application to fruition. I think that, again, is a wonderful example of what can be done. And when that kind of data, rich data sets, which, say, Amul has available with them, are brought to bear with models which can use them with an orchestration layer acting in between, I think is a tremendous example of what can be done with some vision, some domain knowledge, some data, and integrating it with technology. I think it's a huge gain. So these are clearly areas. Likewise, healthcare is another huge area where I think the impacts can be immense in terms of supporting doctors and others with the right kind of diagnostic tools. We've launched something in neurological care where they study EEGs and bring together better diagnosis. It's been done in the case of X-rays. It's been done in the case of a number of other tools. A number of other diagnostic tools studied better, yield far better in terms of diagnosis. And what it makes up for, people get worried about, will people lose their jobs? But I think what it will do is ensure that far superior quality of service will be available through substantially enhanced productivity of the medical personnel. I mean, doctors will be able to deal with more cases. They have better expert assistance. They can combine their domain knowledge with this application of technology to deliver significantly better services. And in a country like India, I don't think, and for much of the global South, I don't think we can ever say that in some of these critical sectors we have all the personnel that we need. Exactly. Whether it is doctors, whether it is nurses, whether it is judges, whether it is policemen, you don't have them. So this will really be a force multiplier to deliver better quality services in all these sectors.
Yeah, I truly believe that this is going to be game-changing, where we can get better coverage and better quality through AI in these critical areas. So, Secretary, when we look at India's growth trajectory, sustaining a 7% plus GDP growth, and we also have the amazing Viksit Bharat mission laid out by the Honorable Prime Minister. How does AI factor into that equation, and which sectors do you realistically think will expand over the next decade, where AI will act as a force multiplier when we talk about the economic growth that India has ahead?
I think, I was actually in Bangkok yesterday. and the International Monetary Fund was hosting a conference called Asia 2050 in terms of, and the main theme was technology and what can technology do. So the IMF, in my view, has a very conservative assessment that across globally, AI can add about 0.8% of growth to global GDP every year. So which is quite large, but in my view is still conservative. I think in a country like India, what it can add to the economy is much more significant. One part of it is what happens in the digital sector itself. We have studies which show that our digital economy is growing twice as fast as the rest of the economy. So that in itself will be a substantial growth driver. Today we are at about 12 to 13% of India's overall economy. By the end of this decade, we should be about 20% because we are growing twice as fast. But more than that, I think the overlay of AI as a general purpose horizontal technology across a range of sectors is going to enhance productivity in those sectors. And I think that is the critical task. We talked about agriculture, likewise in manufacturing, likewise in various services-oriented industries. How do you sort of deliver better quality, better productivity, better services, better efficiency? And how does that contribute to significant growth? I think that's going to be the story, and we are going to see a lot of that in the years to come. That is, in fact, people were telling us that the adoption technology is moving at a particular trajectory. The adoption by enterprises is moving at a trajectory which is slightly below that. To some, that is an area of concern. To me, I think it just gives us that little wiggle room and little time to actually catch up and catch our breath literally and make sure that the transition is something which can be managed from a societal and a policy perspective. So I think that's the time that we'll get to pivot. That's the time that enterprises will get to adjust to the new reality. But I think we are going to see a higher productivity curve. And really, in that sense, if we look at this as the Industrial Revolution 5.0, then probably this is the opportunity that a country like India and much of the global south will get this opportunity to grow prosperous by the middle of this century.
Wonderful. And how do you think about the small, medium enterprises? They are the backbone of any country's economy in terms of employment, adding economic value. And there is this worry at times that advantages of AI can accrue only at the top end of enterprises. So how are we thinking about the SMEs?
I mean, my own personal experience, both as a civil servant for so many years and seeing SMEs work, and my understanding of this is that SMEs can actually adopt this technology, and it is something which will truly work for them far more than it works for many others or many other segments. And, speaking to you as a representative of FICCI here, and this is an appeal I have given to many chambers of commerce in the past, that you are the people who really have to make sure that SMEs are in a position to adopt this technology. Yes. We've actually launched a study now, picked 3 sectors: electronics manufacture in itself, which is under MeitY, textiles, and pharma and manufacture in that segment, and a few other MSME clusters, to figure out how exactly the overlay of AI could work in these small and medium enterprises and how they can adopt this, and what is it that government need to do as an intervention to make this happen. Sometimes we worry that the pace of technology change is so fast, and especially in the AI world, what's true last week is changed by this week. In spite of that, I think it's important to understand what would be effective and what would work. And from an Indian context, I think even more than a pursuit of what, say, AGI could eventually do, I would be more interested in, at the sectoral level, what is it that AI can do for productive enterprises to become more productive, to enhance their efficiency, and to make sure that they are more profitable. And I think there would be huge opportunities for MSMEs there.
Wonderful. Now, the summit, showcased extraordinary investments, that we had commitments coming from Reliance and Adani and Google and OpenAI and Anthropic and so on. But physical infrastructure does have its own timeline. It takes time to materialize. How are public-private partnerships being structured to ensure that the national compute backbone and trusted data sharing architecture, is built at the pace that this mission demands? Because as you rightly said just now, technology moves very fast, and therefore the need for infrastructure to move fast. So commitments and announcements are one thing. How do you see this partnership working?
See, I think there are two or three things which are very important here. Initially when we launched the India AI mission, we had this vertical on what we can do to create compute. And we're now talking March 2024, which almost feels like 20 years ago and not 2 years ago. And at that point, our target was we should do at least 10,000 GPUs, and we will spend some particular sum on doing this. And our approach was fundamentally to say that we'll offer a viability gap fund to anyone who comes forward to set it up. Then somewhere along the line, we found that that may not be a very fair arrangement, but because people had already made announcements saying that they would be establishing these facilities. And therefore, we needed to find a way of accommodating facilities which were already coming up. Which is why we pivoted and said that, all right, we can do a viability gap fund model probably later, probably to meet some specific needs of government so that it doesn't sort of impact any of the existing providers. But for now, we will actually subsidize use and subsidize acceptance and, in a sense, underwrite the market, yes, so that those who create the data center and GPU-based infrastructure can offer it to people in the country, especially for innovators, researchers, students, MSMEs, and so on, where we also subsidize it. Now, this effort to enroll a number of players meant that, in India today, per GPU per hour, the costs are about a third of what it is internationally. And I think that's a huge success. We need to offer a whole lot more. We do understand that financing arrangements require some more detailed attention. They want longer-term commitments to these buying operations.
Yes.
Such rapid change is something that the financial institutions don't adapt to as quickly. So they want some certainty that the companies who borrow money from them to set up the infrastructure would be in a position to repay. And therefore, whether they have longer-term commitments of people agreeing to buy, compute capacity. Likewise, certain other arrangements will need to be organized. The power infrastructure needs to be organized. India has a huge strength in terms of, one, the very large size of the grid, and two, the availability of renewable power in different places. A lot of it sometimes cannot be used because it's available at a time when other demand is not there. So a lot of this needs to be harnessed effectively to make sure that we have this build out of the physical infrastructure. And I think we have tried to approach this through a number of ways. One, of course, is this buying model for compute. The other is to simplify the whole procedure for, power supply, for telecom, and for building clearances at the state level. Some of these are at the central level to make sure that there's an ease of doing business for establishing this kind of infrastructure. And, of course, you're also familiar with the announcement in the budget that there would be clarity on the taxation for international companies setting up these facilities in India for a global market, and where they are supplying for the Indian market, of course, that's a different set of rules. So I think the government is doing its bit to support the build-out of this infrastructure. And these announcements are a reflection of the faith that companies across the globe, Indian companies and overseas companies, which is very heartening to see, have in two or three things. One, that the potential of India as a market and what India can offer. Two, the trust in India's policy framework, and the trust in the kind of infrastructure that India can put together to support an industry of this nature. So I think we will see a substantial build-out of this, and the government is determined to support this build-out as we go along.
That's wonderful to hear. Let's talk a little bit about data sets, because those are so crucial. We almost think of them as infrastructure and foundational. So the Indian AI Datasets platform is central to this, and we talked about, in the summit, building curated high-quality dataset commons. Your take a little bit more on how you're looking at data sets. How do we build more trust and all of that when it comes to, because people are sensitive about data, whether it's a small, medium enterprise about their operational data, or I as an individual thinking about my health data. How are you thinking about that?
I think there are 2 or 3 things. I mean, at a pure personal level, I think the Digital Personal Data Protection Act strikes a very good balance between the public interest in having this data used to support AI and various other enterprise, and at the same time making sure that the privacy aspects are not lost sight of.
Yes.
So I think it strikes that balance very well. It makes sure that there could be technological means to make sure that there is anonymization of data. So each one of these, the framework, I think the legal framework has been structured well as far as personal data is concerned. And that should give India a kind of a leg up in that space. Now, when it comes to other forms of data, and one of the biggest data collectors and sources of data is the government itself. And in the government, there's often been this reluctance of ministries and departments and agencies not being willing to share data even amongst themselves, forget about with the outside public. I think we are breaking through that reluctance. The Prime Minister has repeatedly pointed out that the siloized attitudes towards data needs to break down, and there has to be a willingness for data to be shared. And he has been very particular that this is an initiative that needs to be pushed forward far more aggressively. I'm very happy that the AI Kosh, the datasets platform, is now 10,000 data sets strong. So I think it's a significant step forward. A lot more needs to be done. There's a lot more data. And I would really urge, researchers and others who can use this data to actually make use of it and come back to us with a feedback as to, what can be improved? How can we do this better? What else can be added? And that would help us push various agencies to actually do those elements better. So that is one part. And the other part is, there's nothing here which says that it is meant only for government data sets.
Yes.
Privately maintained data sets which could be used more broadly by enterprises or by others can also be shared. The third aspect, which I think is, again, very relevant, and you raised this point, is that many enterprises at an enterprise level, for commercial secrecy reasons and otherwise, they would be reluctant to sort of share all the data that they have. And what I see increasingly, and which is why I feel that the future also lies in making sure that there are smaller models which are built, which can be deployed locally, used locally, and that's a huge opportunity which we really need to work on. And that will give them the security that most of their sensitive data is retained with them, but at the same time they take advantage of what needs to happen. So, in the manufacturing space, I think this is a huge opportunity. I used to, for a while, a few years ago, I used to run a paper company for about a year or so. And, one of the initiatives we launched there, and I should check how far it has gone, we had 4 generations of machines. The earliest one was installed in the 80s, and the latest one was about 5-6 years ago. The latest one had all the gizmos, and it had every form of IoT, and the data got thrown up regularly. Now, the machine which was installed in 84, I can assure you, produces very high-quality paper still, but it's a mechanical device without too much of electronics and things. So there's a huge opportunity to actually retrofit equipment of that nature with sensors and with various other electronic devices and collect the data and see how it can be used in industry-specific ways. And one of the things that we've been attempting to do through the 12 models that we are building out is to actually address issues like this. What is it that we can do in in cases, what is it that we can do for manufacturing? You could have quantitative models, and you could have other kinds of models which work in a manufacturing scenario. And are relevant there. So you don't have to build a large language model for that. So those are the kind of solutions which I think are hugely possible.
Absolutely, I agree. Now, India's DPI story, I think each one of us is so proud of our DPI story. It's one that the world has studied and tried to replicate, whether it's UPI, Aadhaar, and ONDC. Genuinely world-class and amazing results and impact. AI is the next layer. How do you see the integration happening? And what governance frameworks ensure that AI layered on DPI doesn't create additional risks? How do we balance the risk versus benefits as we build on the rails that we have in DPI?
I think there are two things which are very important. One is riding a layer of AI on DPI, because DPI has this big advantage in terms of the volume and quality of data, transactional data that they hold. And that in itself can offer huge opportunities for what you can do in terms of, studying that, analyzing that, and what it will offer an AI model is immense value. Of course, some of it would be personal data, some of it would be transactional, and therefore there would be embedded personal information there. So we'll have to figure out ways of anonymization and ways of making sure that the personal elements are removed and this data can be used as efficiently as possible for this. And the other big advantage with this data is already in a digital form. It's in a usable form, machine-readable form, which can be used very quickly. So one is, how can AI actually enhance what is happening in DPI, how we can actually offer better options, services, solutions for the users of DPI. So I think that's a huge opportunity that we need to work on. The second is really creating a DPI for AI, which is the other way. So which is, partly to make sure that we actually democratize access and ensure that everyone is able to reach to this. So how do we actually institutionalize a DPI kind of mechanism within AI to make sure that it is something that everyone can access, it is something that everyone can use. And that in some form is what we are attempting through the the 7 pillars of the India AI mission, and especially the AI Kosh part of it. And partly, eventually, if the MeitY platform really takes off, then at a global level, you're really envisioning a DPI for AI. So AI on DPI and DPI for AI is both
best of both
approaches that we need to
We've
take.
often heard regulatory sandboxes being cited. What has India learned from the early experiments when we think about in this space in fintech or health, everything working in a regulatory sandbox?
I think in both of those segments, there are some very useful lessons. In my present capacity, I'm also a member of the Payments Regulatory Board. And there's a fair amount to learn in the kind of regulatory sandboxes that the financial sector regulators have built and allowed various experimentations to be tried. And I think that is clearly a space which we should explore for AI as well. In the AI governance guidelines recommendations, which was given by the committee chaired by the principal scientific advisor, this is a very key recommendation that's been provided. And we would love to use that and move forward. The second part of it really is, techno-legal regulation of doing this, which is, the database regulation of how we can actually allow some of this to work. And that, again, takes care to a significant extent about privacy concerns on the use of data, and at the same time making sure that the benefits are not deprived to various people. So on that, again, there's been a paper which has been put out by the government, and we would love to take that forward as well and see how we can get that done.
So research is the long game. And we know that in Google, because Google DeepMind's amazing work on the AI frontier, we know it's true research at the cutting edge that drives progress in technology and in AI. It's well known in India, Secretary Krishnan, that we have amazing talent, we have skill. But AI requires deep institutional investment, and that needs to be sustained. And we also need to have the ability to retain the best talent. Given our ambitions, and we've been pretty bold in our ambitions, do we have the best programs? Are our current programs adequate when we think about this?
I would. They never meet every contingency, but I think what you should look at is recent innovations and see what has happened. ANRF and the RDI fund are two which come to mind. Both have been created with precisely to address the concern that you raise, that in India, investment in R&D has been limited. We just about invest a little over 0.7%, a little under 1% of our GDP in research, in R&D, and most of it comes from the government. And very little of it comes from the private sector. So how do we crowd in more money into the R&D area is something that I think we are attempting to do now. Key effort there has been that we support from the government side to a significant extent the research efforts which are taken up by the private sector. That's precisely what both ANRF does and the RDI framework does. And the RDI framework offers about 3 or 4 different vehicles through which R&D effort can be further finalized, deep tech investments can be sustained. So we want to use every possible avenue there is of actually putting down money and investing in deep tech research through these mechanisms. And we really hope that this can happen. The other point that you raise is, for talent, what is it that we can pay for that kind of research to take place? Now, we've attempted, for instance, if you take Bharat Gen as an experiment in IIT Bombay. Now, that is truly one area where actually private money is not involved. In all the other models that we have supported, there's also been private money and there's been a government grant. Here, it's almost entirely run on government grant. And they encounter the same problem, that they don't have the flexibility to pay the kind of remuneration that some top-notch researcher could possibly get in the private sector. Maybe Google DeepMind would hire them. So I think we've given them some flexibility. We've created a Section 8 company, an independent entity, to give them some flexibility to make sure that they're able to hire quality talent when they really need it. And, they're able to work with it and go forward. And I think geopolitically also there are developments which possibly should help us in sort of sustaining some of this effort. And some amount of flexibility here. And I think finally, we also find that in the Indian private sector, this culture is building up. And I think more of them are now willing and more of them want to see these kind of deep tech investments and investments into R&D. So all of this, in some ways, I think the constellations are coming together and hopefully the stars align and we should be able to move forward.
I'm very optimistic, honestly. That is why we say it's an inflection point, because never have we seen so many, factors come together in the right direction. So very optimistic. Secretary Krishnan, when we think about the last few years, it's been wonderful to see women's participation in the workforce going up. But when we look at the world of AI research, women's participation in frontier AI research remains very low. What is being done structurally beyond having that aspiration and that ambition to have more women participate here?
I think what we are seeing is, at least, the state where I come from, actually, women's enrollment in higher education is more than men's enrollment in higher education. So I can see that, and it's changed. And it's also, increasingly we are prepared to support. For instance, in the AI summit itself, you had a whole innovation thing which was powered by women, so it was called AI by Her
challenge.
So there was one challenge which was specifically directed at that. So that's fundamentally to highlight why it's important that many of them come into that space. More can be done, of course, and I think we need to continue to sort of ensure that we actively encourage it and ensure that they are able to participate in this specific area. Also, make sure that they have access to, especially enterprise-based, entrepreneurial funding, innovation funding, and startup funding. I think all of that is essential for them to participate. And again, we stand ready. I mean, there are some solutions which address it at a different level. Women in manufacturing jobs, assembly line jobs, those kind of issues we've addressed through basic level interventions. Now, as you rise up the ladder, then the number of other complex factors which come into play. And as a government, I think we are prepared to do what it takes to make sure that we encourage that participation. Because at least I'm fairly clear that, you can't, if you don't engage 50% of the population into whatever enterprise that you're trying to push, you're literally trying to fight with one arm tied behind your back. So it's silly to even attempt it. You have to. It's a necessity, and we have to go with it. And if there are factors which inhibit participation, then we really need to work on making sure that we get rid of them.
And I think it's a call to action for corporates or for industry bodies like us when we think about AI diffusion or skilling, to just have that angle of, are we thinking enough about tier 2, tier 3 women? How do we bring that diversity into our plans and strategy? Very, very clear.
This morning we had actually a discussion. We run this program called Future Skills Prime, where we have about 27 lakh people enrolled, and about 40% are women. So it's a fairly heartening number that so many of them are taking it up. And about more than 60% of the participants are actually from tier 2, tier 3 cities. So I think it's changing. The world is changing.
Indeed, a changing world. Pivoting a bit, and you touched upon this a bit back in one of the answers you gave, but one of the concerns I hear most often from industry across sectors is the whole regulatory aspect. There is, given that AI is evolving, so regulations are also evolving. And it's wonderful to see the progress, like you said, the tax treatment for data centers, that clarity was super helpful. But companies are continuing to accelerate their investments. That's wonderful to see. How do you look at regulation and that balancing act when we think about the urgency of people wanting certainty? And how do you make sure that you're balancing it with not getting it wrong,
I think if you look at it in the most recent, in the past few months, we've seen huge forward movement on regulatory reform.
Yes.
The labor codes having been notified, I think was a big reform waiting for a long time, would really energize companies, including companies in engineering, R&D, GCCs, and so on. So it will make a huge difference for them. So I think from that perspective, that's one key reform which has been done. And I think the budget also saw some very, very significant announcements on tax certainty. We talked about what it is for data centers. Same thing for other GCCs and engineering R&D firms in terms of cutting the time frame for the agreements, advanced pricing agreements to 2 years, and then making sure that what is it called, the APA value is raised to 15.5%, the threshold is raised to 2,000 crores. I think these are huge reforms which had been waiting for a number of years to happen. So you actually see the momentum of reforms of this kind really picking up. And I think that's a wonderful sign. In fact, many people, even in yesterday's conference in Bangkok, I think this is something that many people reflected on, that the pace of reforms in India has again picked up.
Accelerated,
So I think the inflection point that you mentioned, I think we are just past that inflection point. You're going to see many more things changing.
That's wonderful. Building on that a bit more, it's been wonderful to hear that the government is talking about balancing innovation over regulating, and we've specifically heard comments like, hey, we look at other continents or countries and we want to get the balance right. How do the discussions happen behind the scenes? Tell us a little bit more about this, wanting to balance innovation and not over-regulating. How do you get it?
I think, let's be realistic. I think the most convincing answer that I can give you is grounded in logic.
Yes.
That's when people will say, okay, there's
Yes.
a reason. Now, if you look at, a country like the EU, or a group of countries like the EU, and, many people say, oh, they take this regulatory approach. I talk to my counterparts there. They say that, look, if we don't get into regulation early enough at the EU level, then you might end up with 27 nations regulating
Yes.
or entering the same
Yes.
space. So it is, in some senses, a preemptive measure to make sure that, at a nation state level, it doesn't happen. Now, likewise, if you look at the US, although the federal government has said that they don't want to regulate, there are a number of states who have intervened and who have got into this regulation. So you have both of those contrasts. Now, in India, I think our objective situation is such, particularly in the AI space. I can't speak for other areas. There are 2 or 3 reasons why I think we don't need to regulate immediately, or we don't have to necessarily legislate immediately. The first and most important reason is that we don't have any uncertainty as to whether somebody else can step into it.
Yes.
Our constitutional framework is clear.
Yes.
This is a subject of the union list. This is an area where the central government has to legislate. So we don't have to worry about any of the states stepping in there or somebody sort of querying the pitch. So that certainty is, I think, important to recognize. The next factor is that I think our existing laws, to some extent, give us some space to regulate or to sort of restrain some of the harms which AI can create. And I think that's what we have tried to use thus far.
Yes.
Use existing laws to regulate that space, whether it is the IT Act or whether it is the BNS.
Yes.
We've been able to use those to sort of keep some of these other harms at bay. And I think that is important. And there, I think the message has been fairly clearly understood, articulated and understood on the other side by the technology companies. So I think it's been a constructive engagement.
Yes.
To see that we've been able to make sure that it doesn't spill over into other areas. And of course, another important area of what we need to do in terms of regulation in the AI space is on use of data.
Yes.
Our DPDP Act is already in space.
Yes.
So that way, I think the existing legal framework, so when we say that we don't want to regulate immediately and we'll use existing levers, we have the levers with us and they seem to be adequate. People are used to them. People are comfortable with them. And that makes it easier. Now, if there is something unforeseen which comes up, as a government, we always need to be ready to step in. And I think that we are confident in our ability that we can sort of step in when the need arises. And therefore, I would say that people should see this particular statement that we don't want to regulate as a statement of real, true intent, because it actually reflects what the reality, objective reality is.
So India has an impressive scale in terms of talent. The Stanford AI Index confirms that. But when we look at frontier AI research papers, when you look at the actual publications at Neural PS, ICML, the depth is still not where it needs to be when we look at our ambitions. And so we have to look at our curriculum, our PhD programs. What structural interventions are we thinking about here?
I think, as far as AI talent is concerned, the cutting edge of that talent where you'd probably need a very small number, probably in their tens or in their hundreds, who would be at that level globally. And I think, in the India AI mission, we have a project to support PhDs and MTechs and others who are doing their master's programs with a fairly substantial stipend so that they can actually work on precisely the kind of areas that you're talking about. We have to do more to popularize these programs. We also have to ensure that we have enough advisors, faculty members who can actually work on this and take this forward. We have some centers, of course. Some of our IITs are doing outstanding work in this area. Some of our IIITs are doing outstanding work in this area. But I think more needs to happen there, and specifically on the AI-related work. And what I do notice is more energy and more people sort of pivoting to this, and from more traditional areas of computer science or from those backgrounds trying to come into this area to see where this can go forward. And what is most instructive sometimes is to see the kind of people who have been in this space.
Yes.
And, people who have done cutting-edge AI work have done it from a completely different discipline. I mean, if you take Demis himself and Global DeepMind, I mean, his PhD, his Nobel Prize is for chemistry, and it's not for... So I think what we need to do is attract more people from cutting-edge domains to see, what is it that they can do in this space. And I think more of that is happening, and more needs to happen. And also, I think we can also take heart in the fact that many of the people globally who are working in this space are also of Indian origin.
Absolutely.
And so I think it will inspire more people, and you will see more of that in the days to come. So that, I think, is one area. But then talent in this space is across. I mean, this is at the cutting edge level. Then, you come down the level. You have to make sure that we create the right kind of talent at every level to do this, and every kind of job that AI needs.
Right. We spoke about inclusion a bit earlier when we spoke about tier 2, tier 3 cities or women. But when we think about inclusive AI in the context of India, our linguistic diversity, how spread out we are, how are you thinking about inclusion in that context?
I think in some ways this work actually preceded a lot of the work of the India AI mission itself in the ministry. For instance, our Bhashini program predates this, and it's been a hugely successful program. We now do it in 22 languages, and in addition, many dialects are getting covered. Likewise, both Sarvam AI, whom we supported, and Bharatjan, whom we supported, have both sort of worked on, the databases of Indic models to Indic languages to actually move forward. So I think at one level, the emphasis on looking at this has been important. At another level, it is, I think, AI in that sense can be the great leveler. Because, it does away with these, it makes it easily translatable. I mean, I don't have to necessarily learn another language and try to express myself. I can express myself naturally in my mother tongue, in my own language. And somebody at the other end who speaks a completely different language is able to transact with me, and that can make a huge, huge difference. And India, with all its diversity and so many languages, linguistic heritage, I think truly has the opportunity to provide models which will work in other scenarios too, whether you're looking at Africa, Europe, or any of these locations where, again, there's a multiplicity of languages. What we can create can be of great use. And truly, voice-first multilingual model is probably what will assure AI its success in breaking through many of these barriers.
Absolutely. When you think about the entire global south, to move beyond text to speech is frankly the great barrier breaker. I agree. The New Delhi Declaration, 92 endorsing countries, was a genuine diplomatic big achievement. How does India convert the diplomatic capital into how we are able to influence, global AI norms, standards, governance, architecture as we move forward?
I think it's important for a moment to dwell on the success of this and, what is the significance of it. You had major countries who did not sign on in Paris, so all of them did sign on here. You had other countries who didn't even attend the previous three summits and who were here, including China. So I think it's a significant achievement that you have the US, you have China, you have UK, you have France, you have Brazil, you have India. You have all of these large countries with a lot at stake who have endorsed the declaration. I think that's a huge and significant achievement, which actually adds to this entire momentum of how the world thinks about it and how we come together to make sure that we are able to push forward this agenda. Now, whether you want to take it in the United Nations way, because they've been big players in this, or whether we want to take it forward independent of the United Nations, I think we've created in Delhi the momentum for this to move forward. And I think we've also created for India a voice in this entire framework. Given that we have been consistently engaged with both summits of this nature and with the Global Partnership on AI, I think we are seen as a very serious player in looking at how the governance of this should be addressed and how we actually reach it in a more inclusive fashion to those who are left out of the benefits of technology. So I think nobody can ignore India as a credible voice in this space, and we have the opportunity to set the agenda. We did set it in Delhi, and both in terms of democratization of access to resources and in terms of inclusion, I think we've had a key role to play, and to actually use AI in a positive sense. We've probably lifted the outlook on AI into positive territory, which is, I think, huge. And that should give us enough momentum to see how we sort of direct the conversations around how the regulation of AI will take place globally.
No, absolutely. Secretary, what would you consider a defining structural change that will determine India's trajectory as a genuine leader in the global AI landscape? Now we're talking about what is that one structural thing?
Now, that's a tough one. I mean, if I were to do it, I think it's fundamentally about capacity. I think once we have a credible India-based model, that will make an important impact, and we start using it in more and more applications. I think that will make one huge impact. The other is, in the hardware capacity. I mean, what I would love to see, we already, putting together servers, putting together various other kinds of IT hardware equipment in the country. We start putting together AI servers, making more of them in the country, becoming part of that entire, value chain globally. That could, structurally make a significant difference. You have the data centers also in the country. You have the ability to put together the servers also in the country. You have the models that you can put together. Then, you become truly an important part of that ecosystem.
Where do you put the institutional coordination or agility here? You reference in the context of data sets not being siloed, and that's an important push. But when I think about the structural bit in the Indian context, there is something here about the different institutions that have to come together.
I think, that is of course a very critical element of what needs to happen. And I think there has been this talk of how we can take even the AI mission to one level higher so that it becomes something which sort of spans different ministries, because it's no longer just technology, it is technology plus plus. So, how we span the concerns of various other ministries, or concerns which actually are the business of other ministries. And then we are able to take all of them together. I think some of those changes will have to come, and will have to be, when we talk of inclusion, we have to include more people into the way that this whole thing goes forward, so that they get committed to this, and they are able to sort of take this forward. And some of this institutional change, the other big change that I see, and which will sort of enable this, is the convergence on technologies. Our story on the semiconductor space and our story on the AI space, they're coming together in a sense and converging as a common message. And we need to have structures to manage this convergence too.
Secretary Krishnan, before we close, what's the one message you want to give to industry leaders and the founders and the startups who are listening to this? What's the one message that you have?
I think the big opportunity, and I think if there were 100 different objectives of doing the India AI Impact Summit, but if there was one which was very central and which we did not very openly articulate, in the sense of this is a message because you often don't do it, but it's the subtext literally, is to actually provide a platform for Indian companies and Indian startups and Indian innovators to showcase the kind of solutions and applications that they can build for the world. I think if there is one thing that I would like to see emerge from this summit, it is for India and India's vibrant tech sector, whether it is innovators, startups, or existing companies, for them to emerge as the application, for India to emerge as the application capital of the world. And that's only possible through their efforts. So that's what I would like to happen. And for this, two things are necessary. One is to create the conditions for Indian enterprises to actually absorb a lot of this technology, and for them to be able to deploy this elsewhere in the world as well.
Absolutely.
So that's really what the industry should go forth and get done.
Absolutely. And build on the momentum that's just started. Secretary Krishnan, thank you first of all for your exceptional leadership at the ministry. And I don't want to just talk about the summit. In the pre-summit, in the drumbeat of events, in all of the strategic planning that happened, like I said earlier, it's been a very proud moment for us as Indians as well. It has truly served as a global milestone for India in the way we anchored India and the Global South narrative. I truly appreciate our conversation today. You kept it strategic, but grounded in reality as well, and giving us a clear sense of the path forward, how the government is thinking about the roadmap, what you're doing, and what your expectations are. I think that is very, very important when we think about the trajectory on a go-forward basis. It's a two-way thing. Accountability lies both ways, and both sides have to do their thing. Thank you. At FICCI, this kind of structured dialogue is exactly the role that we see ourselves playing, convening the voices that need to hear each other and ensuring that policy intent translates into actual action on the ground in the ecosystem. We remain committed to supporting India's AI journey through continued dialogue, by enabling regulatory clarity through that dialogue, and by helping industry, the big enterprises and the small ones and the founders and the startups, finding their rightful place in this national mission. To our listeners, the fine print will continue to examine the architecture behind India's most consequential economic and policy decisions. Until next time, thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you.